the reason that we're talking tonight about the possibility of how much money Liverpool could indeed spend, basically, it stems from an article, and Kieran Maguire, who is a football finance genius and expert, put together a piece where he looked at each individual Premier League club and he looked at if they're in danger, or, well, as he calls it, it's FFP wiggle room. I think that's the perfect way. Kieran Maguire, Steve, I know Kieran Maguire, somebody you also hold it in high esteem, somebody you know, and he certainly knows his stuff when it comes to football finances.
He's absolutely the man. Yeah, a good friend of mine from the BBC called Guy Kilty. Oh, he won't be listening. He's a big United fan, but he set up a podcast called The Price of Football, which I'm sure a lot of people will have heard of, and it's had millions and millions and millions of downloads. But Kieran presents that with Kevin Day, the comedian, the Palace fan comedian, and he's fantastic. He's at University of Liverpool, isn't he?
Yes.
Kieran Maguire.
I think is it John Moore or is it the University
John
of Liverpool?
One of the universities in Liverpool, and he was always our go-to guy at 5 Live for football financy type stuff, and he knows his stuff. And this is it's a really, really, really interesting piece actually. Loads of really interesting numbers in there. Some quite surprising actually, and some a bit less surprising.
So the one that stands out to me, gents, and the one we've got to start with is Everton, because Everton are the worst off of all Premier League clubs, James. They're already 35 million in the red, so they're already in trouble. Now, if by some miracle they were to qualify for European football, they may come a little bit unstuck. 35 million quid in the red, Steve. I mean, it's a bit surprising considering they're still shit.
Well, it's not surprising in a way, though, because, I mean, talking about a club that has spunked money like it's been going out of fashion over the last few years, but on rubbish football players, and players with no resale value, players that they haven't been able to shift on, and the ones they have shift
wages.
On, big wages, guys like I don't know,
James Rodriguez,
Sigurdsson, James Rodriguez, guys like that on mega money.
I thought you were going to say on remand.
They bought in for decent fees. And they can't give them away, and their model has just been completely unsustainable over the last few years, and that Kieran's research bears that out. I mean, at the other end, you've got Tottenham that could basically spend any amount that they would ever wish to do.
Have a guess, James. James hasn't seen this, I don't think. Have a guess. How much can Spurs spend before they get into trouble with FFP?
Emil
James,
Smith
have
Rowe
a guess.
Scored.
200 mil.
Double it.
Fuck off.
Yeah.
Can he spend 400, yeah?
£100 million before they get into any FFP issues. Now, the good news for us is we're the second highest on the list.
How much can we spend?
Steve, £273 million before FFP kicks in for us.
How have Spurs got more than us when they spend more than us?
It's not how much they have, it's how much they can possibly spend before FFP becomes an issue for them. It's not how much
how is that dictated when they spend more? They're not in the Champions League as often as we are, and we spend less.
There's a few different numbers Kieran worked off, and it's on all the expenditure from a football club. But one of the interesting charts that was part of the article was how much, I think it was how much of the spending is on wages and stuff, and City is like 95%, or is it how much of income goes out on wages? I don't know, whatever it is, but Tottenham was something like 55%, and City were 97%. So they're not spending much of what they're getting in. Their wage structure is really, really, really tight, and that gives them a lot of wiggle room. So I don't know. You'd have to ask a Tottenham fan whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, wouldn't you? Because they're probably looking at those tables thinking, well, it's all very well and good that we're run nicely and sustainably, but we never win anything. So
they could sell Harry Kane, James, and have half a bill to play around with before they became before they had to worry about their place in the Europa Conference League.
I think the difference is that they won't spend that much money. They can spend it, but it's not really much use when you've got an owner who is kind of as competent as Levy is, because he's spent on the stadium. And the thing is, in owners' minds, I feel like they overrate certain investments. So, like, investing into the stadium, yes, that's good, and yes, it's needed when you want to make a club bigger. But then Levy has also put himself into a position where he knows he needs to spend money, but he doesn't really want to. And it's ideal if he doesn't have to. Like, if he can get away with it, if he can get top 4, that's it. So I feel like the second, and it's a big if because he needs to do this first, the second he's got Tottenham as a top 4 team again, or competing for top 4 at least, whether that's with Antonio Conte, the next manager, I believe that will be when the money spending stops, and I don't think he'll need to spend 400 million to get to there. And I do believe, even though he can spend that much, he's still going to need to let go of assets before he feels comfortable going ahead and spending that much money. Liverpool kind of a similar situation. Did say that we can spend 270. So,
yeah, somebody said a bit of a clickbait title, but let me just retort that a little bit, because to some extent I understand where you're coming from. It's not to say Liverpool will spend 273 million quid, but what it does suggest is that if our owners wanted to let the reins out a little bit and, you know, take on a small bit of debt, or maybe spend some of the money from the sale of the 11% that they sold, they could spend 270 million quid without incorporating wages, of course, as well, without us getting into FFP trouble, i.e. allowing us to still play in the Champions League each season. But it would of course, Steve, involve the club taking on some debt.
Yeah, I mean, we're not talking about, we're not saying, are we, that they've got 273 million just sat in a bank account doing nothing they could turn around and spend tomorrow. Yeah, I don't think it's as simple as that, because obviously, you know, money in the stadium, all that kind of stuff, you know, the building work that's going to go on over the next few years, that all factors in as well. Tottenham have got this beautiful gleaming stadium that is making an absolute mint for them on match days, for example. And, you know, that kind of thing, that all contributes, doesn't it? So, yeah, it's not as simple. It's not clickbait, but I understand what they're saying, because it's not.
Oh yeah, so do I. That's why I was trying to clear it up.
I don't understand it. The headline is that Liverpool can spend that much. It's a very different question. Will they spend that much? We're only informing people that they can spend. You know what I mean? Like, it's not that big an issue. We all know that we're not going to spend.
They can spend that legally. But then, you know, United could spend. I think United are on there for something like 200 million, aren't they?
Yeah, 243. The top 5 will be Spurs have 400 million to play around with regards to the FFP rules. Liverpool 273, United 243. Chelsea might surprise a few people at 241, and then Arsenal at 201. But I think what often goes unspoken about with Chelsea lads is they sold a lot of young up-and-coming players this summer and brought in a lot of money.
They let a lot go out of the club. And even with City, people will be surprised how many players City can let go of. I think they let go of like a striker called Nemecha, who's only ever been in their academy, and then went out on loan for a season and sold him for 13 million. You look at Chelsea, Abraham, 20... How much was Abraham? Was he 20 million, 40 million?
Yeah, something like that.
Like in between that range, that's a lot of money for a player who's only really had 1 or 2 seasons of first-team football. It's kind of like Curtis Jones at Liverpool. That's the level of experience Tammy Abraham had, except I suppose he did have a full season up front for them. However, even outside of that, you know, over the seasons, how many players have they had out on loan? Like Victor Moses, I swear he's still out on loan for Chelsea, even to this day.
Am I wrong, or did they have to change the rules because Chelsea had so many youth players out at like Vitesse Arnhem?
Maybe. It really wouldn't surprise me. Vitesse is like their second team.